This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Hello, everybody. Downrigger Dale here for the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and we've got all kinds of folks here. One of the things that we're doing this week, and this is going to be interesting, we've got emails from you, we've got phone calls. Captain and I got into a debate over this topic, so we decided to go to an expert. What I'm talking about here is the walleye spawn. We're talking about Fort Peck Reservoir. You probably heard us, if you listen to the Montana Outdoor Radio Show, you probably heard us talking about when do you think the ice is going to come off. We even created a contest about it. And then as walleye fishermen, we got to thinking, well, wait a minute, how are they going to go out and net walleye and collect eggs and do all the great things they do to help manage that reservoir if the ice is covering the reservoir? How do you even get to them? And so I came up with the theory of, well, temperature tends to trigger the spawn, and at least that's what I read about. So we don't really need to worry about that because as the temperature of the water rises, of course, the ice is going to leave, and they're going to be able to do that. Captain says, no, Downrigger, you don't know anything. Walleye, there's very cold lakes all over the place. They're going to spawn anyway. There's no way they can get to the walleye. So we've got Heath Headley here. He's the fish biologist for Fort Peck Lake. Has a tremendous amount of knowledge on that, especially walleye, and also knows a lot about that hatchery there. So, Captain, you're over in Fort Peck with Heath Headley. We are going to settle this debate once and for all, hopefully. So why don't you introduce Heath and give us your take on your theory of where we're going here.
All right. Heath Headley is the fish biologist for Fort Peck Reservoir.
That's what he just said, yeah.
For years, you've collected eggs out of Fort Peck, and you do it down to the dry arm. Now, the contest Downrigger refers to when Darren McMurray, who runs the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, he runs the Fort Peck project. When he declares ice is off, he's probably looking at the dam area, not all the way down to the dry arm. So let's start off right now. Rigger says there's 12 to 20 inches of ice down there in thickness. You went down there, I'm sure, and checked it. When I talked to you a week ago, you said that there's a good possibility you're going to be able to collect some eggs this year. Tell us what you found and what you think is going to happen this year.
Ooh, boy, there's a lot going on there. But
that's what I thought.
So to kind of start out, we went down there last week. Checked down at Nelson Creek where, you would typically launch a boat and whatnot. But unfortunately, reservoir elevations are lower. Actually, they're about 2 feet lower than what they were previously, the year before. So as far as launching a boat, that's not going to happen. There's mud and only a matter of inches of water. And then looked in Rock Creek, that would be the next accessible point, boat ramp area, and there was plenty of ice there, starting to recede along the shoreline, maybe 10 to 20 foot open water between the shore's edge and then the ice. Can't get in right at the moment. A couple of the guys actually went down again today to take a look, kind of assess the situation, see if things are loosening up a little bit more. But at least at this point in time this week, we're not going to be putting any nets in, unfortunately.
Okay, last year, are you telling me that with the water level it was last year that you actually used the Nelson ramp?
That is correct. Yeah, we did. It was nip and tuck. I mean, we were turning up mud with our propellers. We were running prop boats, and there was roughly 2 feet that we could get through to get to our trap netting location. But yeah, we could do it, and it was nip and tuck, like I say.
And when you, I did know that you didn't actually pull out of Nelson. You actually pulled your traps and all your boats and everything. Didn't you pull it over to Rock Creek to exit at the end because the water was continuing to go down?
Exactly. Yeah, it was just going like, a very small incremental inches down throughout the walleye spawning operation last year. And we actually took everything back up to Rock Creek, unloaded it back on trailers and whatnot.
So do you put your nets in the same location every year?
Depends on the water level.
Okay, so how do you determine where to put those depending upon, let's say the water level is what it is this year, and let's say there wasn't any ice on and you could get on there, you'd probably have to go through Rock Creek. How far down Nelson or how far down the dry arm would you go?
So just kind of based on the elevation right now, we're going to be traveling 10 to 12 miles, south of Rock Creek down, closer to McGuire Creek, closer to Nelson Creek. And we're always looking for that warmer water temperature. You guys kind of alluded to it, at the start of this podcast that, there could be ice lingering around up here near the dam, main lake stuff. But that shallow stuff heats up really quick. There's not a lot of water there. Some of those big mud flats, dirty water, it can heat up really soon. So we're looking for warm water to find those fish that are in that spawning activity.
Dry Creek was flowing in there about a month ago. That water would probably be warmer, I would assume. So do you think the walleyes will, gravitate towards that Dry Creek when it's running in?
Yes, they definitely will. We've seen it in the past, and, very early on when fish studies were going on in Fort Peck, they determined that, there's walleye that are moving up into that creek at certain times, along with some of the other tributaries, depending on reservoir elevation and the amount of flows coming in. So like where we're at right now, and I kind of alluded to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Heath, I wanted to ask you about this. Now, so just to clear up some of what this debate the captain and I were having is it the temperature that's going to trigger the spawn? So if the water is so cold that the ice isn't off the reservoir yet, will that not trigger the walleye to spawn?
So you guys are both kind of right, really. And I know I'm not trying to take sides here.
Well, actually, most people say you're both kind of wrong. Yeah, nobody ever says we're both kind of right.
Captain.
Yeah, no, you guys know what you're talking about, kind of.
We're not going to teach any biology classes. Yeah. I know that in the near future.
We won't be invited to any universities real soon or anything like that.
So go ahead and tell us the real thing. What's going on?
Yeah, so going back, there's still ice. Let's just say, well, obviously there's ice on Fort Peck right now. Okay. If there's water coming in into these tributaries and they're finding that nice temperature of around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, they're able to start that whole spawning process and whatnot. But, in other portions of the reservoir, say they're a little ways downstream or near the dam area or wherever that water's colder, those fish are not in spawning mode. They dictate, or they're cold-blooded. So what's going on in their surroundings, that's going to dictate how those fish behave. And with that being said, you can have some fish that are attempting to spawn, but other fish that are going to be holding on to those eggs. And so it goes both ways. Like I said, you can have fish that will, spawn, do their thing, and then other fish that will actually hold on to the eggs, and we call it reabsorption. They will not attempt to spawn whatsoever. And kind of the big thing to kind of go further down this road, it really depends on what the conditions are like once we get out there, when things really open up. If it stays cold, they're going to lock right back up. They're going to quit cruising the shoreline areas. They're going to go deeper, and then they're going to wait again, hopefully, if water temperature is warm.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question. Have you ever not collected eggs in the springtime on Nelson Creek from the walleyes?
No.
Okay.
We've always collected some eggs. Like the lowest number of eggs that we collected was actually, it wasn't really too long ago. It was in 2018. And that, I think I told you in the past, was our latest start on record. That particular year, our first day of checking trap nets was April 23rd.
Okay, and why was that? Because of the ice?
It was because of the ice.
Oh.
The other thing was too, the reservoir was up higher at that time. We were able to unload at Nelson Creek boat ramp area, but kind of goes back to what you were talking about, the big dry creek running. Those fish essentially kind of got by us and got further upstream. You know, we couldn't launch a boat. So we were kind of like, we got out there and immediately we were seeing female walleye that had released their eggs. And it's like, well, shoot. But kind of going down the road, we actually saw that they spawned on their own pretty gosh darn successfully.
Oh, really? So
yeah,
we didn't lose in Fort Peck anyway, but
yeah,
the problem is that you take those eggs and you distribute them through waters throughout Montana.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, this is the sole source for walleye eggs here in Montana.
Wow.
You know, there's about, I think, was it 20 or 21 different water bodies in eastern and central Montana that get stocked from these annual efforts.
Now, Heath, maybe you can take our listeners through just how this collection effort works, because I think we're getting a clearer picture painted here that, okay, we want to go out and we want to get those walleye, collect eggs, so now you can distribute them around to other water bodies that need them. I think we put some of us at ease that if you weren't able to collect any walleye eggs for Fort Peck anyway, we would be okay. We'd still be able to catch walleye. The population wouldn't die off or anything, right?
Right. And that's a great question, Dale. I mean, you know, the other thing that we've seen with some of our other netting surveys and looking at population trends, there's actually a really good high number of walleye currently in the system, and there's a lot of small walleye in the system too. And I will say there's some still nice, larger sized fish as well, but so a lot of small walleye.
What's the process then? How do you when all is well and that you're able to get out there? How do you net these? Because I think some people might find that kind of interesting. Is how do you go out and find the walleye and get them, and then how do you get eggs? And take us through that process.
Sure. Yeah, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. We're using what's called a trap net, or actually a modified fyke net. And it's a frame with some mesh, and there's actually what's called a lead line that runs perpendicular to shore. So when these walleyes are attempting to spawn, and actually other fish species like northern pike, they're cruising along, looking for other fish, looking for habitat, rocks, gravel, again, whatever the particular species is. They hit that lead line, and it kind of just, funnels them out towards the trap net, and there's a series of cones in there, kind of like essentially a minnow trap. Once they go into that cone, they can't swim back out. And we have those nets set. We check them every day. Well, I should say, if conditions allow. There has been a few times where it's been way too rough or whatever to get out. But they're fine, so typically it's about a 24-hour period where they sit. We check them and sort through the fish when we're out there, determine if there's male walleye in the trap net, females, and then we even break it down into females that are green, is what we call them, which are still holding onto their eggs, or females that are ripe, which are starting to release their eggs, and then even a third category, which it's one we don't really want to come across, but it's spent, means they released their eggs.
So they already started their own spawning process.
Correct.
How long have you been collecting eggs this way? How long has the department been doing that? I know Ruggles, I think, was he was a fish biologist here for a while.
Correct. Yeah, and it even goes back before Mike Ruggles. Back in about the mid '80s is when they started on Fort Peck, and it's kind of really interesting, really, that how it's evolved over time. Because actually earlier on in that mid '50s period, they were actually attempting to collect walleye and walleye eggs in other locations in Montana, like down at Downrigger Reservoir, Cooney, Yellowstone River down at Intake, and and Fort Peck as well. And it's just, when it boiled down to it, they're like, Fort Peck is here. It's pretty gosh darn consistent. We can get our hands on good numbers of fish almost on an annual basis. And so, yeah, starting in what was it, early 90s, I think it was, kind of all the efforts shifted over to Fort Peck.
So, Heath, I was looking at just some facts about that hatchery. So after you would collect these eggs, they would go into the hatchery. Now, I saw there's an incubation capacity for the hatchery of 125 million walleye eggs, which just sounds staggeringly huge. How many eggs do you typically collect? On an average year, let's say.
Yeah, so I mean, we're typically talking around about 70 million. And I think that number is, that's really getting up there in terms of the amount of eggs, that are going to be brought in the hatchery. And I should point out, the other thing is roughly half of these eggs are going down to Miles City Hatchery as well. They're not just all going to Fort Peck. We're splitting up about half and half, just to kind of, make sure everybody has plenty of room. Just not essentially put all your walleye eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Now, before Fort Peck Fish Hatchery was created, everything went to Miles City.
That's correct.
Okay. So what's the capacity of Miles City? Can Miles City take 100 million?
I can't speak for that. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that, but.
All right. So,
I just got one quick question here, Captain. So once those eggs are into the hatchery, then how long does that whole process take before walleye would then either go back into Fort Peck or start getting shipped around the rest of the state to other reservoirs or lakes that need walleye?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good question, Dale. So when the eggs come into the Fort Peck hatchery or, Miles City hatchery, it takes roughly 20 days for those eggs to hatch, plus or minus a couple days. And it's actually pretty neat. It's all dependent on what the water temperature is doing. If the water kind of warms up a little bit, they actually hatch sooner. However, if it cools down, then it takes a little longer for them to hatch. Because again, talking about that whole cold-blooded, aspect of fish being fish, they respond and how things are going on in their surroundings. But then once those fry hatch out, they have roughly, a couple days, they'll start absorbing their yolk sac. But by about the second day that they've, been completely hatched out, they need to immediately get on to zooplankton for feed. Otherwise, it's real gloom and doom for them. So
what was the determining factor to actually start collecting walleye eggs? You saying that they started thinking about this back in the 50s and 60s?
So, yeah, I mean, walleye were stocked in Fort Peck back in the mid 50s, handful of other places, but then again, at that current time, there wasn't a lot of demand for it, but now over the years, there's been increased, interest in places where, walleye might be suitable for stocking. And that's what increased this effort in terms of, us going out, collecting eggs, and then, raising those fry or fingerlings to be stocked out, like I said, in the eastern central part of Montana.
So do you think this year there's probably a really good possibility you aren't going to get, if you do get your nets on there, it's going to be the latter part of this month in April, and it could be into May. Mm-hmm. Are you going to try regardless? Once the ice goes off, are you going to put those nets out and try to collect those eggs?
Oh yeah. No, we're going to give it a try, and you never really know what happens until you get out there. And, a good example is kind of like last year. Even though last year we got out there early, kind of typical, first week in April, man, we were just hampered with cold fronts, snow. Some of our nets even got a little bit of ice around them, and we just drug on for, close to 3 weeks really, and nothing was happening. But by about that third, end of the third week in April, that water temperature warmed up to about 50 degrees, and we were in the right spot at the right time. And I think you'll find this interesting. We actually collected, it was like 56 million eggs from April 28th to April 30th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
So those fish, like I said, they still held off for a little while longer. And then once that water temperature warmed into that desired range for them, we were right spot, right time. And we were busy.
That sounds like it. And we're going to come back. I want you to think about how you can solicit volunteers. I mean, when you're collecting that many eggs in 2 days, you can't do it all by yourself.
No.
And
yeah,
so,
and then when we get back, we're going to stop just for a minute because Captain, I want to tell you about an important message here. But also, when we come back, we'll ask Heath a little bit about what happens to a female walleye after eggs are collected from her, and we'll get into all that. We're getting a very interesting walleye biology lesson going on here. But first, Cap, let's talk a little bit about our friends at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. If you look at their website at rmtte.com, one of the things, if you click on About Us, you can learn a little bit about them, but you'll see the word investment come up quite often. And I think that's really interesting because they truly look at the inventory they carry as an investment for you. These are not little cheap trailers that you find, in a Home Depot lot somewhere. These are trailers that are going to help the folks that need to make a living, haul their precious animals, you name it. We've just been so impressed to learn more and more about this company, haven't we, Captain?
We sure have, and I know that Home Depot wouldn't have to worry about them advertising on the podcast anymore.
No, I pretty much nixed that out of there, didn't I? Yeah.
I'm looking out at the headquarters parking lot as we're doing this podcast right now, and there's 3 trailers out there. That's a Montana lifestyle. If you don't have 2 or 3 trailers, you're not a Montanan. I mean, that's an old Jeff Foxworthy redneck
guilty
joke.
as charged here. I mean, it's what we do. We're out there and enjoying life, going fishing, going hunting, you name it. And we've got trailers for all different uses. And that's where you go to a place like Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer, and they're also servicing those trailers. They stand behind those trailers, not obviously when you're going down the road, but if you have a problem, because if you're going down the road, they probably wouldn't want to run behind you the whole time.
No, they wouldn't.
But they're there to stand behind what they sell. They're there to take care of it. They're a family-owned business that keeps you going down the road and hauling your precious stuff.
Yeah. See, Josh, speaking of family, he's a great guy. And also the brands that they carry, Rigger, Diamond Sea Trailers and Accessories. When they service something after they sell it, they're going to get a quality trailer to sell, so they don't have to service it when it, if it ever breaks down. It won't break down. And then you have CM truck beds. You see those all over the place, hauling bales and hauling welders.
Yeah. Well, and the other cool thing is if you want to know about a company that stands behind their product, the folks at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer actually use the products they sell themselves. So, obviously that tells you how good they are.
Yeah, they're in Missoula at 5680 Expressway, and it's, as Rigger said, rmtte.com. That's their website. All right, let's get back to Heath here. Heath, let's talk a little bit about volunteers. I know during the pandemic it was tough. You guys couldn't have any volunteers, but you really appreciate the guys and gals that come out. And I did it one time way back when Ruggles was doing it, and it's fascinating. I mean, if somebody The problem is this year, you don't know when exactly it's going to happen. And I guess that's one of the things about being a volunteer. You just got to be on call.
Well, I will say with the captain, though, the reason he hasn't done it since is that there were several lawsuits filed by several different walleyes against the captain, and so they just don't let him out there anymore.
Right, and also the FWP department filed a few lawsuits. So. Yeah, we finally got those cleared up, so I'm ready to volunteer again.
Where is the captain going with all those coolers?
Heath, tell us about how you get a volunteer.
Yeah, so over the years, I mean, this has been going on for close to 30 years now. We have a list of people who love to come back and help. So we have people that have done this before, but then also, we typically put out a press release, and just word of mouth gets around to, as you can imagine, it probably gains a lot of interest. Well, you can see big walleyes and whatnot, and yeah, things can get busy. There's a lot of interest, and again, I mean, we appreciate all the help because, it's neat for us to talk to everybody, show them the process, but I mean, then they can see what we see out there too, and it's like there's some very nice fish around.
Well,
so
and also,
what happens to the females that after you've collected the eggs from them?
They go right back into the water,
So
Dale.
they go back in the water, other than the ones that the captain took and put in his belly.
Yeah, no, we actually have a series of holding pens out there, and like I talked about it a little bit earlier, we keep the ones, the females separate from the males, and we even have kind of separate ones for the females, ones that are ready to release their eggs, and then ones are still holding on to. But yeah, we just, dip net those fish out of the holding pens. If they're ripe, take them to a hatchery personnel, a fish culturist. They actually, squeeze that female gently, and then the eggs get fertilized. And yeah, that fish goes right into a net, and then somebody will release her, typically a volunteer, right off the back of one of our barges.
I know one of the things that I kept thinking about when I saw those walleyes, where are they when I'm fishing? I mean, there's literally hundreds of big walleyes when and this is just one part of the lake.
Right.
Now, does a walleye up at Crooked Creek, the farthest end of Fort Peck on the west, do they come down to Nelson and spawn, or do they spawn some other places? Where else do walleye spawn in this lake in Fort Peck?
No, that's a great question. So for the most part, there's really two areas, kind of in the upper Big Dry Arm area. Again, some of the tributaries, but if you look around Rock Creek, McGuire, there's some nice gravel where they could do their thing. And then yes, on the far western end, you start getting back into a little bit better rock, gravel habitat, and then, going up into the Missouri River as well. And it's interesting to kind of elaborate on your question there. We have actually seen and documented tagged walleye that were tagged down at Nelson Creek one year. And just 2 years later, I know it was back in 1998, it was a larger size female, upper 20-inch fish. She was tagged at Nelson Creek where we do our walleye spawning operation. And 2 years later, she made a migration and actually went all the way up towards Fred Robinson Bridge.
Wow.
Was caught by an angler. He released her. And then fisheries crew out of Lewistown caught her again, like a week or two later up around Two Calf Island, and it was during April. So it was during spawning phase. So, there's mixing that takes place kind of from, the Big Dry Arm to the west end of the reservoir. And like I said, we've even seen that vice versa with fish that have been tagged in that upper part, the west end, show up down at Nelson Creek.
Okay, I got another question for you. Water elevation has always been a big issue here in Fort Peck. Some years it's low, some years it's up. If it's up, does it cover more gravel? And that makes a difference of where these walleyes, because they're looking for gravel. They don't go, okay, I'm going to go this, like a salmon will come back to a boat ramp that they were released in as a fingerling. Tell us about the walleyes. Where they just look for gravel.
Yeah, and again, kind of going back to, there's gravel and rock kind of all through that Rock Creek and down stretch. And then again, going back to the tributaries, like in the Big Dry Creek or Nelson Creek itself, you'd be surprised. There's actually some nice firm gravel areas up there where those fish will travel if they can get to it. Again, so it goes back to elevation, habitat. Can they access it for good spawning habitat?
A year ago or 2 years ago, the Tough Guy tournament, what took place about the third week in April. And basically, it's just a one-day tournament, a few hours. The guys take off from Hell Creek. They came back up to Duck Creek. So there are some walleyes, and the guys that won it fished in Duck Creek. There are walleyes that come up, and they're spawning up there in the Duck Creek area too.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that or kind of talked about it. But yeah, so there's fish that will go up into that area. And we actually kind of get this question almost every year. It seems like, well, why don't you guys go up into Duck Creek and try trap netting? And the answer is, well, we actually did one year. It was actually before my time, but it was tough. There was a few fish that were being caught, but kind of going back to that dam area, you have some really deep, cold water very close by. And you get any big wind events or anything like that, it mixes that water up right away. And it cools it back down, so you might see it start to warm up, but then all of a sudden cools down really quick. And when they did that effort, they weren't getting a lot of walleyes, but the walleyes that they were getting were still holding on to their eggs. They weren't ripening up because there can be like I said, 50 degrees down in the Nelson Creek dry arm area where we're trapping. And then same day you go up in the Duck Creek area and you might have 38 degree Fahrenheit water temperature. And it's like, yeah, and you almost see this same thing year after year. Some nice fish are caught occasionally, but their bellies, they still have eggs in them. Those females do. And it's like, honestly, they might try, but probably really never amounts to much just because of the temperature and habitat.
So Heath, back to that female you were talking about that made all those travels. So will a walleye like her just spawn wherever? They aren't like some fish who always want to come back to their same spawning grounds?
Yeah, it's going back to, they're looking for more of a gravel area. It doesn't have to be
just go wherever, huh?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the particular gravel area. It could be in the same general vicinity, but not the exact same spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, we want to take one more quick break here, but when we come back, I'd like to have you talk a bit about genetics or possible genetics. Often we as walleye fishermen get into these discussions of, oh no, you got to let that kind of walleye go, that big walleye go, because that's going to pass those genetics on, and we're going to get bigger walleye from that. Let's talk a bit about that and more with Heath Headley, but we want to make one more quick stop. And this is another family business that I think is so important to talk about, because we're getting to that time of year, Captain, where people start to talk about, well, we're finally going to make that remodel job. We're finally going to put on that extra room and get it done, but we want it to be unique. Well, we found a place that has some of the most unique woods around. You would not think in Missoula, Montana, where I'm talking about Superior Hardwoods of Montana, they have woods from all around the world. And you can make your home so unique looking. It just boggles my mind. One of the things that really got me interested in it was you discovered them and put your wood floor into your home there, Captain.
Well, you've never been invited to my house in Lewistown.
Well, I look through the windows. What I do is I sneak around your home and I look into the windows, just hoping one day you might invite me in. But other than that, I usually curl up in the garage with your dog, and I know my place.
You've never been invited, but that's for obvious reasons. We don't have a lock on our liquor cabinet, so we don't like to let Rigger in there. I did have a couple, Bernie and I had a couple over last Saturday night, in fact, and the wife of the couple had never been in the house before, and the first thing that she said that came out of her mouth when she came into the house was wow. And of course, I was thinking just because she had met me probably for the first time. And she goes, no, these floors are unbelievable. These hardwood floors and she went and she wanted a tour of the whole house. And everywhere she went, she saw superior hardwood floors. And that's kind of the situation there. So they are looking to buy. And if you're interested in selling corrals, believe it or not, if you're using a corral that you're not using anymore, they'll buy the wood from you. And
this repurposing of wood has become so popular, and the way they have their own mill there and they can take an old corral board and turn that into some of the most amazing pieces of wood that can then be turned into all kinds of different furniture or flooring or paneling and that. We even saw that where they took an old mill that had sat by a railroad for years and years and years, had served its purpose, probably 100 years ago, and they took that whole mill down and turned that into just an amazing looking wood.
They're located across from that big fitness center, the Peak Fitness Center in Missoula. It's superior-hardwoods.com. Let them, Downrigger, Dale, guide you through the woods.
Yeah. So next to a fitness center. I guess I've never noticed the fitness center before.
If it would be across from a hamburger joint, you'd probably know where it's at. Oh,
yeah. Well, then I'd know it. But fitness center,
or a bakery, with glazed donuts and stuff.
Anyway, hey, Heath, before we left, I wanted to ask you a bit about the genetic side of things, as far as what you know about it. So is it like people where, you notice a family that is got tall parents, a lot of, tall kids, that family tends to have kids that are similar to the parents, that are big, tall kids. Is that the same way with a walleye, that you catch that big walleye and you go, oh boy, it'd be great on my wall, but everybody tells me put that one back in because she's probably going to produce eggs that are going to be fish like her. Is that true?
So genetics can play a role, but really what it boils down to is the habitat that they're in, the forage conditions. And just for example, take this trap netting egg collection effort as an example. Like I mentioned before, some of these walleye are going to get stocked to other Montana water bodies, and they're good fisheries, but that particular fry or fingerling that gets stocked out from some of these bigger females that we collect, automatically doesn't turn into a 10-pound walleye over, again, just say hypothetically 12 years or whatever. It really goes back to forage base, Dale. And even another example, like our salmon, we've had to get salmon eggs from North Dakota in some years. And, they typically don't get quite as big as ours over here. They get some fish around 10 pounds, but boy, we're stocking some of those fish in Fort Peck, and, they can easily get to 15 pounds or larger at times. Again, going back to food levels. And a lot of that has to do with the primary forage base being Cisco.
And, we're talking about the Fort Peck lake. Below Fort Peck, I got a question for you. I had a guy tell me that when the releases are low out of the dam right now, which right now they're like 4,800. I think the minimum is like 4,000 that they for power. But Darren McMurray, who we're going to try to get on a podcast here in the near future, who runs the dam, we're going to ask him about that. But as a biologist, are there walleyes, if the river is flowing good enough, if there are walleyes that come up from Sakakawea in North Dakota, will they come up to the dam?
Yeah, so there's definitely walleyes that'll migrate up in the Missouri. They do in the Yellowstone as well, I know, because they have some tag fish that show up over in those neck of the woods. But, again, kind of going back to tributaries, like the Poplar, Milk River, there's fish that will go up into those areas too.
Okay, so Milk River, that's another question I have for you. It's really flowing right now. I mean, it's flooded all over the place.
Yeah, it's gone over the banks.
Yeah. And so in the years past, the last couple of years, the fishing right at the milk, at the mouth, when it comes into the Missouri, has not been as good as it was, like, say, 3 years ago. But the river has been down. The Milk River has been down because of the drought situation. And I noticed, like, for example, at the mouth, when they were biting, it's like 9 to 10 feet of water. And the last couple of years, you could only find about 8 feet of water. Is this going to make the fishing for the walleyes, once it clears up? Right now, it's mud when it flows in there. Is this going to make the walleye fishing a little bit better down there, do you think?
It might. I can't speak from experience or anything, or, we don't sample down there. At least us personally, we're up on top, up on the reservoir. But, I would think, again, going back to your question earlier, those flows are going to trigger fish, and they're going to think about wanting to try and get up into those tributaries. So, there should be a few more around. And
also Rock Creek is a river, a creek, blue ribbon trout stream over there in western Montana. Doug Persico, who used to own Rock Creek Fisherman's Mercantile until he passed away, he always said it was always good to get a good flushing down the rivers once in a while, where the flow would, the water would actually go over the banks. Is there any truth to that as far as a biologist's point of view?
Yeah. Over time, if flows are low and really slow, you're going to get sediment piling on top of that rock or gravel, cobble substrate, whatever it is. And then you get a little bit of, flow coming back on it. It cleans it right back off, and you got this nice, clean structure again, as opposed to muck.
Mm-hmm. Darren McMurray from the Corps says the water level from where it's at right now is going to go up about 8 feet. It'll peak around 8 feet in July. Is that going to be good for the fishing?
Yeah, it's definitely going to change it compared to the last couple of years. We essentially never had any shoreline vegetation get flooded. So yeah, it's gonna concentrate some fish or push some fish shallower at times, I would say. So probably guys are going to change their fishing strategies, I would think. But unfortunately, it's not going to come up until, sometime in May or June. It'd be nice if it was earlier, but that's just the way it is. We don't have a lot of local snow runoff coming into the system right now, because right now our, things that are going to be spawning are walleye and our pike, and especially our perch, which is a very important prey base for the small and medium-sized walleyes that are out there.
Heath, we've taken a tremendous amount of your time. We really do appreciate everything that you've shared with us. My last question is this. Just to, maybe put some people at ease or not. But a lot of folks know that the walleye that get pulled out of Fort Peck and spawned and put back in, those eggs then now become little walleye that get shipped all around in different areas. If the egg take is just not really much there, what do you feel is going to be the possible, and obviously you can't, see the whole future, but the possible impact on other walleye fisheries around the state that tend to depend on the hatchery at Fort Peck?
Sure. No, I think, hopefully by saying it will be okay. I just want to put everybody's minds at ease. We're going to go out, we're going to attempt to trap fish and collect eggs to raise as fry and fingerlings. And with that being said, so even if we don't get a lot of eggs like we have in some years, we'll still try and get all the ponds filled at Fort Peck and Miles City for fingerling production. So, there might not be a lot of fry that really go out, but hopefully we can at least get, a decent amount of fingerlings to get those water bodies stocked, in parts of Montana, wherever they might be going.
And one of the things I want to add as we conclude this podcast, and I'd also like to echo what Downrigger said. We appreciate you spending time with us, even though I know you don't particularly care for rigor. But
that's not true.
He's often a remote deal, especially in the boat, because he just keeps asking you questions. You can't even concentrate on fishing when you fish with us. But
I know what you really think.
You have a tremendous responsibility, and it's a tough job because, we had the wizard, the water wizard, Matt Cowan on with a podcast talking about all these electronics. Well, it seems like every year comes out, there's a better way to find and look at fish down on the bottom, and people obviously want that so they can catch fish. And when they don't catch fish, if they're like Rigger, they blame me. They blame the captain of the boat. But
that
some
would
guys
be usually the issue.
Some guys will blame FWP. They'll say, "Well, we need to get the limit. We can't have people coming out and just taking everything else." And I don't know. I mean, I have never thought that way, and I just tell them, of course, you probably get tired talking to people, but Heath Headley is a fisherman. Why would he do anything to this lake? He's a fish biologist of the lake that's going to harm the fishing, whether it be for salmon, whether it be for northerns, whatever it is, because you're a multi-species guy. And so I appreciate what you do. And I'm glad that you're in the position you're in, because to have a biologist that actually loves the fish is a big deal. And we've known a couple of them throughout the state.
Exactly.
They do a great job, and they come under a little bit of a microscope, and I really sometimes, I mean, people just like to say what they think, and I call it the picnic. I call it the campground. The beer campground? What am I the campground?
Well, basically, what you're describing is a discussion in your fifth wheel pretty much every evening between the two of us. We all have our theories. We all have our stuff. And when you can't get the catch that you thought you were going to get, well, it can't be my fault that FWP isn't managing this reservoir right. Well, I agree with you, Captain. The folks at the FWP, especially we've come to know Heath, he's been so kind to share his knowledge with us, is that, hey, they love these waterways and this fishing just as much as every fisherman out there.
And also,
they want to see it healthy for a long time.
A good example is last year. June was a tough walleye month. And usually June's a great walleye month. Somebody asked me, Captain, when should I go fish walleyes on Fort Peck Reservoir? I say June, the beginning of June 15th to July 15th. Well, it turned on for walleyes in July and August because of the temperatures and everything else. So I appreciate what you do, and I know I speak for Rigger too. He just obviously mentioned that just a little moment ago.
Yep. All right. Well, Heath, thank you so much. I know we're going to have you back and talk a little bit about salmon down the road and some other things. One last thing, Heath, they do still offer tours of the hatchery, don't they?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Just call down, get a hold of one of the fish culturists there, and they should be able to set something up. One thing now, this time of year, just, again, try and be patient because it's going to be busy. We're going to have a lot of stuff. Well, we're all going to have a lot of stuff going on, but they're going to work on, filling the ponds for fingerling production and, having eggs in the incubation racks, all that sort of stuff.
Okay. And then also for a volunteer, how can they just got to listen to the Montana Outdoor Radio Show, go on montanooutdoor.com. You have a Facebook page that you're going to be asking for volunteers?
Yeah. No, good question. They can contact myself, phone, email. But then, for, who knows what's going to happen as far as time frame and all that stuff. And again, apologize in advance, if you're interested and you just can't make it because of whatever it is. A good way to kind of check and see our progress is look at that FWP Region 6 Facebook page. I try and do updates, every 2 or 3 days on how our trap netting's going, what the water temperatures are, what we're seeing for fish, that sort of thing.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. We'll get into a lot more of that down the road and learn a lot more. But until then, get out there and enjoy Montana's waterways and forests and all that. Be good stewards. Be polite fishermen. And, of course, above all, have yourself a good one and take the folks out that you love fishing. Until then, we'll talk to you soon, right here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock, high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.